Serious Survivor here. Today we're going to look at 12 things that will happen after a nuclear war or nuclear apocalypse. This video focuses on the event of a global nuclear war with the assumption that all strikes hit their designated targets, and will not focus on the events such as an isolated attack or a terrorist attack with an RDD or similar, the type of event that not only changes everything that we've known but also redefines us as human beings, leaving an outcome that presents inimitable complications and circumstances. And this video looks at the defining characteristics of what will occur. This video assumes that the strikes are mainly surface burst, which will absolutely incur the largest amount of long-term damage. Airbursts are discussed in a different video, link in the description. 1. The event itself. No matter where we are and who we're with, when the initial attacks occur, it will most likely come without warning, or at the very best, maybe 10 to 15 minutes. Will this be enough time to reach the safety of a bunker? For most, it will not be. The ones who cannot escape the target areas, cities, installations, military bases, government facilities, these people will most likely perish in the blast itself. Estimates vary drastically depending on which sources we read or study, but a general consensus seems to be that considering over 90% of the world's population lives in urban areas, then from the first moments of this event, billions would be lost. This will be the first effect, and for possibly 6.5 billion people or more, it will also be the last effect they see. Firestorms. Firestorms will follow the nuclear explosion. Once the blast wave and shock wave have subsided, and all that's left of the explosion now is the aforementioned mushroom cloud looming ominously over the horizon. But the heat from the blast can produce a phenomenon known as the firestorm. Firestorms present a grave danger to those still trapped within the confines of an urban area, and for those who have sheltered in bunkers or blast shelters. It also presents grave danger to the environment itself as forests burn along with cities. A firestorm may also develop into a mesocyclone and induce fire tornadoes or fire whirls. The greater draft of a firestorm draws in larger quantities of oxygen, which significantly increases combustion, which also substantially increases the production of heat. This may ignite flammable material at a distance ahead of the fire itself. Radiated heat from the fire burns so forcefully that it can melt metals, glass, and turn asphalt into flammable hot liquid. These firestorms can spread rapidly and consume all in their path. Escape is the only option, as there's no possibility of extinguishing fires of this magnitude with limited resources. EMP, the electromagnetic pulse. This can also be a devastating result of the event. An electromagnetic pulse is known for its ability to destroy modern electronic circuits. This effect will not only remove our ability to communicate, it will also cause a situation in which all power sources are rendered incapable of supplying electricity to the public. Even if the devices themselves are not destroyed, the power sources will be. Gamma rays from nuclear explosions produce high-energy electrons through a process called quantum scattering. These electrons may become captured in the Earth's magnetic field. They interact with the Earth's magnetic field to produce a coherent nuclear electromagnetic pulse, which lasts about 1 millisecond. Secondary effects can last for more than a second. This pulse is powerful enough to cause moderately long metal objects such as cables to act as antennas and generate high voltages due to interactions with the electromagnetic pulse. These voltages can destroy unshielded electronics. There are no known biological effects from an EMP. The ionized air can also disrupt radio traffic that would normally bounce off the ionosphere. Semiconductors, especially integrated circuits or what we call IC chips, are extremely susceptible to the effects of an EMP. As dependent as the human race has become on technology, this factor alone would leave us in an environment in which all of our devices fail. Grid down. Another result partially attributed to the EMP is a grid down scenario. The EMP effect would not be the only cause of this. The fires and floods will also contribute, but possibly the most critical factor is the fact that nuclear power facilities are considered primary targets in a nuclear strike. A grid down situation is severe enough without any further complications, but this type of grid down will leave us ultimately in a permanent state of darkness. Not only electricity, but everything it provides, such as water pressure, sanitation, filtration, emergency services, communications, and everything else these resources once provided for us. This will be much worse than any grid down from other events. Because humanity will be on the verge of extinction, many will succumb to their most primal instincts, and soul survival will be their only motivating factor. People will become dangerous and chaos will ensue. With this kind of attack, these power stations destroyed completely, there's no possibility of repair in any reasonable time frame. With no resources, no electricity to supply our needs and devices, we'll have to revert back to the patterns and progressions of our ancestors. The fallout. This is one of the most devastating long-term effects. Fallout is the residual radioactive material propelled into the upper atmosphere that follows a nuclear blast. Fallout also refers to the radioactive dust and ash created when a nuclear weapon explodes. Fallout comes in two varieties. The first is a small amount of carcinogenic material with a very long half-life. The second, depending on the height of the detonation, is huge quantities of radioactive dust, debris, and sand with a shorter half-life. All nuclear explosions produce fission products, which are unfissioned nuclear material or leftovers from the radioactive material that was in the bomb, along with weapon residues vaporized by the heat of the fireball. When the fireball touches the ground, the surface bursts, the amounts of fallout are enormous. Short and long-term fallout. Short-term. This is the fallout that reaches the ground shortly after the blast. It will fall in the immediate vicinity of the blast, and its contamination will mainly center around the area of the blast itself. Although wind patterns and the environment can impact this and spread it out much, much further. Long-term fallout. These are the much lighter isotopes and the much lighter particles. They may take months or years to settle, and due to wind or weather patterns may fall anywhere in the world. Fallout is also denoted as either local or global. A surface burst generates large amounts of particulate matter, and this is composed of particles that can range from 100 nanometers to several millimeters in diameter. The larger particles pour out of the stem on the mushroom cloud and cascade down the outside of the fireball in a downdraft as the mushroom cloud rises. So fallout begins to arrive near ground zero within an hour, sometimes as fast as 15 minutes. More than half the total bomb debris lands on the ground within about 24 hours as local fallout. Global fallout refers to the lighter particles that make it high into the atmosphere. These are carried by winds and may reach across the entire surface of the Earth, and due to their mass, this may take weeks to months to several years for them to reach the surface. Hot zones and hot spots from nuclear power plants. Aside from the nuclear fallout produced or created by the explosion itself, we can expect other areas to also be contaminated. And these are called hot zones or hot spots or pockets of radiation, basically. With the destruction of nuclear facilities, this will produce much higher levels of radioactive fallout. Even the facilities which are not directly hit would soon melt down, causing nuclear catastrophes of their own. This will create areas in which humans could not safely pass through or come near to. This is different from fallout from the bomb. This is the process of radioactive decay on elements that were not burned up in the explosion but were stored as fuel for nuclear reactors. So these types of meltdowns continuously produce radiation and will not degrade for many, many years. Acute radiation syndrome, ARS. This is also known as radiation poisoning or radiation sickness. It's a series of effects due to exposure to high amounts of ionizing radiation over short periods of time. In the first hours, some symptoms may appear, and they may include nausea, vomiting, and loss of appetite. After this, depending on the total dose or exposure of radiation, people may develop infections, bleeding, dehydration, and confusion. This is finally followed by either recovery or death. The symptoms can begin within 1 hour and may last for several months. With limited resources, it would be extremely hard to treat any of these symptoms. So our best case scenario is to avoid exposure and to maintain a safe distance from any contaminated areas if at all possible. Floods. Another impact of the event would be the aspect some may not consider, and this is flooding in a lot of areas. When the grid is down and dams and hydroelectric power stations are either destroyed or now unmanned, these structures will very likely succumb to the great amounts of pressure behind their walls. And when this does occur, then not only will the catastrophic flooding in the immediate areas result in massive destruction and the loss of life, but the areas serviced by the dams will also be cut off from their water supply. The rain. Fallout may be pulled in with the products of a pyrocumulus cloud and fall as what's called black rain, which is rain darkened by soot and other particulates, and often including some high acidic compounds. The fact that production facilities have now been destroyed, have been burnt, or are still burning, this means that every type of product known to man is melting and burning. Gas refineries, chemical plants, plastic facilities, textiles, biological facilities, and every other aspect of production facilities will have been consumed by flame or neglect, releasing a myriad of contaminants into the atmosphere, including toxic fumes, gases, poisonous residues, and other dangerous debris, all rising into the sky, incorporated into the clouds and rain. So the rain could prove to be not only fatal to us humans, but also detrimental to all life on Earth. 10. Contamination of water sources and food sources. With nuclear fallout, industrial facilities burning, cities burning, and various products, chemicals, and similar all being released into the atmosphere, this will very well contaminate the majority of water sources in the area. Not only water sources though, all crops, livestock, poultry, everything we rely on as modern humans will now be either contaminated, destroyed, or simply unavailable due to the fact that we could not travel to reach it. This may result in starvation for those who have survived so far. And if the soil is contaminated, this will make the future growing of crops and livestock impossible. Number 11, nuclear winter. Nuclear winter is the term for a theory describing the climatic and environmental effects of nuclear war. Smoke rising from fires initiated by nuclear weapons would be heated by the sun, raised into the upper stratosphere, and spread globally, possibly lasting for years. The resulting cool, dark, dry conditions at the Earth's surface would prevent crops growing and possibly result in mass starvation over most of the world. Enough ash from the burning cities and forests descended into the atmosphere, it could have an umbrella-like effect, which would block large portions of the Earth from the sun's heat. Nuclear winter is very much a theory, and a controversial one at that. 12. The aftermath. The aftermath will leave us in a formidable world in which survival is a daily struggle, and the only guarantee is that tomorrow will be just as difficult. If an event such as this does occur, then the best hope we have is that the fallout has not contaminated the entire globe. Once the initial factors have subsided, once the fires have burned out, once the fallout stops, we will face the obstacles of a once lush and beautiful world that has evolved into a chaotic struggle for survival and sustenance. With temperatures plummeting, livestock, poultry, and crops only a distant memory, we'll face a struggle unlike any mankind has ever faced. But as long as we still have the will to survive, there's the chance. Surviving this is not impossible, especially for those who are able to avoid the initial destruction. We would soon learn what areas we could travel and inhabit and where we could not. Nuclear winter will pass if it happens at all. Throughout history, humanity has faced many struggles, many perils, but in the end, we have endured and we have overcome. Some things we can do to prepare: know our area and the surrounding targets that would be hit in this event. Know how to use the radiation detectors and buy one if you don't have one. Understand the symptoms and the signs of radiation sickness and poisoning. Plan routes ahead of time out of town that don't use major roads or vehicles if necessary. Prepare a bunker or shelter if you can't leave the city. Keep all of your survival gear up to date and functional. Study and learn. Learn how to navigate the land with a map and compass. Have a bug-out retreat planned and stocked, and have means to generate power if possible at that location. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks a lot for watching, and for now, Serious Survivor, out.